Let's talk about breaking out of loops in Python. Here's a function that loops over an iterable of strings and returns a value from within that loop if it finds a string that contains a given substring. If it doesn't, it returns none. So this function stops early in some cases. How could we do that if this code wasn't in a function? The return statement only works inside a function, but Python has a different statement that we can use to exit a loop early. Python's break statement is for exiting a loop early. This code works just like before, but it can even work from outside a function. And even if our code was inside a function, it is sometimes useful to break out of a loop without also returning from our function. Python's break statement also works with while loops. This code might seem like an infinite loop due to this while true, but there are actually two cases where we might break out of this loop. We'll break out of this loop if we guess the correct number, which we didn't in this case, or if we type quit. Something to note is that there's no easy way to break out of nested loops in Python, meaning if we have a loop inside of another loop, a break statement in that inner loop will only break out of the inner loop. So as we loop over each line in our file and each number in each line, when we find this negative number, negative 40 here, we won't process the rest of the line, but we do process the subsequent lines in our file. If we wanted to break out of both of these loops at the same time, we would need to go out of our way to figure out how to do that. So here we've had to add an extra variable to keep track of whether that outer loop is supposed to break out of itself. At this point, it might actually be easier to put this code into a function and use return to break out of that inner loop as well as the outer loop at the same time. In addition to the break statement, Python also has a continue statement. The continue statement doesn't break out of the loop, it just skips to the next iteration of the loop. So whenever we find a negative number here, just like before, we do something different, but we don't break out of our loop. We actually continue processing. We just skip that number by using the continue statement, going to the next iteration of our loop. So break stops a loop, and continue stops a single iteration of a loop. If you need to skip to the next iteration of your loop, you can use the continue statement. If you need to break out of your loop entirely, you can use the break statement. And if you need to also exit your function early, you could use the return statement.